The Billionaire's Secret Desire, a marriage of unexpected love. Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to our special corner where the most beautiful stories come to life and awaken the deepest emotions of the heart. Today, I've brought you a story that will captivate you from the very first moment. It's the story of Chloe Davies, a secretary who for 4 long years has silently harbored an impossible love, watching the man of her dreams every day without him knowing. And it's also the story of Leo Maxwell, a powerful billionaire who has secretly desired his secretary, but never dared to make the first move. Until one day, pressured by his family to have an heir, he makes her a proposal that will change their lives forever. But what will happen when 2 hearts that have desired each other in silence finally meet? Can Chloe hide that she has always loved him? I want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for being here, accompanying us on this beautiful journey of emotions. You are the reason I continue to share these stories that nourish the soul and remind us that true love exists. Tell me in the comments, what are you doing while listening to our story? Are you preparing that special dinner for the family? Perhaps embroidering or knitting as you get carried away by the emotion? Some of you might be walking your dog in the park, or maybe tidying up the garden. I love to imagine how each of you experiences these special moments with us, and don't forget to leave that heartfelt. Like if you're already curious to discover how this passion, held for so many years, is going to explode between Chloe and Leo. Now, prepare your heart, grab a tissue because you'll need one, and let's begin this exciting journey together. A secret admiration. Our story begins on a morning that seemed ordinary, but would forever change the destiny of 2 people who loved each other in secret. The alarm clock rang at 5:40 a.m., as it had every weekday for exactly 4 years and 3 months. Chloe Davies opened her eyes in the small but tidy bedroom of the 1-bedroom apartment she rented in Brixton. And for that fraction of a second that always happened upon waking, she allowed herself to dream she was in a bigger bed, in a bigger house, in the arms of the man who occupied her thoughts from her very first day at work. But as she always did, she pushed away those dangerous thoughts, got out of her narrow bed, and headed to the bathroom to begin another day, pretending to be just the efficient executive assistant everyone knew. At 20, Chloe had become a woman who drew attention without realizing it. Her dark brown hair fell in natural waves to the middle of her back, always pulled back in an impeccable bun during work hours. Her large, expressive green eyes contrasted with her fair skin, which she religiously protected from the London sun. Her curvy figure was hidden behind discreet but well-cut business attire, which she bought on sale in city center shops, always choosing pieces that wouldn't draw too much attention, but would keep her presentable to work beside the most powerful and influential man she had ever met. Her morning routine always followed the same calculated steps: a quick but careful shower, subtle makeup that enhanced her green eyes without overdoing it, elegantly styled hair, and the careful selection of clothes she would wear to spend 8 hours trying to maintain professional composure, while her heart raced every time he spoke to her. That Tuesday morning in April, she chose a navy blue silk blouse she had bought on clearance 3 months earlier, paired with a black pencil skirt that she knew fitted her well, even if no one else would notice that detail. The commute from home to the office on Oxford Street took exactly 52 minutes by tube and on foot. Time Chloe used to mentally prepare for the day ahead, review Leo Maxwell's schedule, and try to emotionally brace her heart for 8 more hours, pretending not to fall more in love with him with each passing day. She knew his schedule better than her own. She knew he would arrive at the office at 8:15 a.m., that by 8:20 a.m., she should have his unsweetened espresso waiting on his desk, that at 9 a.m. the first meeting of the day would begin, and that during each of these routine activities, she would need to maintain the mask of professionalism she had perfected over the years. The 40-story building, housing the headquarters of Maxwell Developments, was one of the most imposing on Oxford Street, with a mirrored glass facade that reflected the constant movement of London's busiest avenue. Chloe greeted the doorman, swiped her card in the exclusive elevator that went directly to the 38th floor, where the CEO's office was, and walked through the marble hallways to the anteroom that had been her territory for 4 years. Her desk was strategically positioned, allowing her to see the door to Leo's office, control who entered and exited, and at the same time have a partial view of him through the glass wall that separated the spaces. Leo Maxwell arrived promptly at 8:15 a.m., as he always had since she knew him. At 34, he was the kind of man who made women turn their heads on the street without him even noticing. Tall, 6'1", broad shoulders that perfectly filled his tailored Italian suits, dark brown hair always impeccably cut, and blue eyes so intense that she felt her legs weaken every time he looked directly at her. That morning, he wore a charcoal gray suit that she knew cost more than her 3-month salary, paired with a dark blue tie that enhanced the color of his eyes in a way that made her forget how to breathe for a few seconds. "Good morning, Chloe. Is the coffee ready?" Leo asked, passing by her desk. And as always happened, she caught his masculine scent, an expensive and sophisticated fragrance that left her a little dizzy every time he came close. "Good morning, Mr. Maxwell. It's on your desk. Warm, just as you like it," she replied, with the firm, professional voice she had learned to use, although inside her heart raced as it always did in the first minutes of the morning, before she had accustomed herself to his presence again. What Chloe didn't know was that Leo had also developed a morning routine that included thinking about her. He woke up every morning at 6 a.m. in his 3,000-square-foot penthouse in Hampstead, exercised in the private gym he had set up at home, showered in the marble bathroom that was larger than her entire apartment, and while choosing which suit to wear, he found himself imagining what it would be like to have Chloe waking up beside him in that king-size bed he had never shared with anyone who truly mattered. He knew he shouldn't think of her that way, that she was his employee, and that any inappropriate move could be considered harassment, but he couldn't control the way his eyes lingered on her face when she wasn't looking, or how he felt like touching her hair every time she leaned over his desk to organize documents. An electric connection. During the 4 years they worked together, they had developed a synchronicity that went far beyond the normal professional relationship between boss and assistant. Chloe knew his every facial expression, knew when he was worried by the way he furrowed his brows, when he was irritated because he pressed his lips into a thin line, when he was satisfied because his blue eyes shone in a special way. She anticipated his needs before he even realized he needed something. She already had the headache medicine in her hand when she saw him massaging his temples. She had already scheduled a massage for the end of the day when she noticed he was tense. She had already canceled less important engagements when she saw he needed time to think about a difficult decision. Leo, for his part, had learned to read Chloe in a way she never imagined. He knew that when she lightly bit her lower lip, she was concentrating on a complicated task, that when she twirled a lock of hair around her finger, she was nervous about something, that when her green eyes shone more than usual, it was because she was satisfied with a job well done. He had memorized the sound of her laughter, which he rarely heard, but which always made him smile, even in the middle of a tense meeting. He had noticed the way she answered the phone, always polite and gentle, even with the most difficult clients, and how she had a knack for calming any complicated situation, just with the serene tone of voice she used. There were moments during the days when the tension between them became almost palpable, although neither of them had ever mentioned anything that wasn't strictly professional. When he needed to explain a document and leaned over her desk, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body and the perfume that made her dizzy. Chloe had to concentrate not to let out a sigh. When she entered his office to deliver reports and bent slightly to place the papers on the desk, Leo had to exert effort not to notice the delicate curve of her neck or the way her blouse fitted her body. There was one particular afternoon, about 2 years after she started working with him, when Leo was signing contracts and she was organizing the documents he was handing over. Their hands touched briefly when she took a paper he was extending, and both felt an electricity course through their bodies. They looked at each other for a few seconds that felt like an eternity, and Chloe saw something in his blue eyes that made her understand that perhaps he too felt something for her. But before either of them could say anything, the phone rang, breaking the moment, and they returned to their professional routine as if nothing had happened, although both knew something had changed in that instant. From that day on, the glances between them became more intense and laden with meaning. Chloe began to perceive that he watched her when she wasn't looking, and Leo noticed that she also discreetly watched him when he was concentrated on a task. It was as if the two were participating in a silent dance, full of unspoken steps and movements that only they could understand. She began to choose her work clothes, thinking about what he would find beautiful, although she mentally reprimanded herself for it. He began to invent excuses to call her into his office, more times than he really needed, just to have a few minutes of her presence. A family ultimatum. Leo's life changed drastically on a Thursday in May when he received a call he had been expecting for weeks, but at the same time deeply feared. It was his father, Richard Maxwell, a 68-year-old man who had built the Maxwell Developments empire from scratch and who never missed an opportunity to remind his son that everything he had achieved in life was due to the hard work and sacrifices the family had made for decades. The patriarch's deep, authoritative voice resonated through the phone, with the usual coldness Leo had known since childhood. "Leo, I need to speak with you today. Come home after work. It's about the future of the company and our family." The tone his father used left no room for discussion or postponement, and Leo knew that when Richard Maxwell summoned a family conversation with such seriousness, it meant important decisions were being made, with or without his opinion. As he hung up the phone, he felt a knot in his stomach that had nothing to do with the usual work problems he was accustomed to solving daily. Chloe, who was organizing the correspondence on the desk beside hers, immediately noticed the change in his expression. She had learned over the years to read every nuance of his facial expressions, and she knew something serious had happened just by the way he tightened his lips and ran his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture he only made when he was truly worried. "Has something serious happened, Mr. Maxwell?" Chloe asked, with the soft, careful voice she always used when she perceived he was going through a difficult moment. It was one of her qualities that impressed him most, the ability to perceive when he needed space or when he needed someone who genuinely cared about his well-being. "My father wants to speak with me tonight about family matters," Leo replied, trying to maintain a casual tone. But she perceived the tension in his voice. "Do you want me to reschedule your morning appointments tomorrow, just in case the conversation runs long?" she offered, and he felt grateful for her consideration, although he knew he probably wouldn't be able to concentrate on work the next day, regardless of how long the conversation with his father lasted. The Maxwell family mansion was located in Hampstead, on a 5,000 square meter property that Richard had bought in the 1980s when the company truly began to prosper. The main house had over 1,000 square meters of built area, with 8 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a living room, dining room, library, office, a full recreation area with a swimming pool, tennis court, and a garden that looked more like a private park. Leo had grown up in that environment of luxury and privilege, but he had never felt completely comfortable with the ostentation his father insisted on maintaining, preferring a more discreet, though equally comfortable, lifestyle. When he arrived at the family home that night, Leo found not only his father waiting, but also his uncle Arthur, Richard's younger brother, and a minority partner in the company, as well as his mother Eleanor, an elegant 62-year-old woman who had always been the kind of person who knew exactly when to stay silent and when to intervene in family discussions. The presence of all the important family members in the main living room already indicated that this would not be a simple conversation about administrative company matters, but one of those family meetings Leo had learned to dread since adolescence. "Sit down, Leo. We need to discuss the future of Maxwell Developments," Richard said firmly, gesturing for his son to settle into the leather armchair that had always been considered his place during family conversations. "As you know, our company is worth over $800 million today, employs nearly 3,000 people, and is one of the most respected construction companies in the country. All this was built over 40 years of hard work, sacrifices, and careful planning to ensure that the family legacy continues to prosper for the next generations," the patriarch continued. And Leo already knew where this conversation was heading, although he hoped his intuition was wrong. "Dad, what are you getting at?" Leo asked, though he already suspected the answer he didn't want to hear. "I'm getting at the fact that you're 34 years old, single, have no children, and apparently have no intention of starting a family," Richard replied, with the blunt brutality that had always characterized his conversations on matters he considered important. "The succession of a company of our caliber cannot remain undefined forever, and I will not allow all our family's work to be lost because you decided you don't want to assume the responsibilities that come along with the privileges you've always had." Eleanor, who had remained silent until that moment, decided to intervene with the most diplomatic tone she always used to mediate discussions between husband and son. "Leo, darling, what your father is trying to say is that it's time for you to seriously consider starting a family. It's not just a matter of business succession. It's also about the continuity of the family name, about having someone to share your life with, about building something that goes beyond work." Arthur, who had always been the most pragmatic member of the family, added, "We understand that you haven't yet found the right person, but we cannot wait indefinitely for that to happen naturally." "What exactly is your proposal?" Leo asked, though he feared the answer that was coming. "The proposal is simple and direct," Richard replied, taking a document from the leather briefcase he had brought for the conversation. "You have 2 years to get married and have a child. If that doesn't happen within that time frame, the company presidency will pass to your cousin Tom, who has already proven he is ready to take on the responsibility of continuing the family legacy." Tom was Arthur's son, 29 years old, married for 3 years, already had a 2-year-old son, and had always made it clear that he had ambitions to take on a larger role in the family business. The proposal landed like a bomb on Leo, who had always believed he would have the freedom to choose when and how to start a family, without external pressures or artificial deadlines imposed by others. "You're giving me an ultimatum," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, despite the rage beginning to boil within him. "We are giving you an opportunity to assume the responsibilities that have always been yours by right, but which come with obligations you cannot continue to ignore," Richard corrected with characteristic coldness. "And what if I don't agree with that deadline? What if I decide I don't want to start a family, just to satisfy family expectations?" Leo questioned, knowing he was treading on dangerous ground, but feeling the need to make his position clear. "Then you will voluntarily relinquish everything our family built, and you will have to find your own way to earn a living," Arthur replied with a harshness that surprised even Eleanor. "The family business is not just a job, Leo. It is a legacy, a responsibility, an obligation to the future generations of our family." That night, Leo returned home with his head buzzing with contradictory thoughts and confused feelings he couldn't organize rationally. He loved the company he had helped build for the past 12 years, ever since he graduated with a business administration degree and began working directly with his father. He loved the challenge of managing large-scale businesses, of creating ventures that changed the city's landscape, of generating jobs and opportunities for thousands of people. But at the same time, he deeply resented the idea of having his personal life controlled by family impositions that didn't take into consideration his feelings, his desires, or his autonomy as an adult. As he poured himself a generous dose of Scotch whiskey on the penthouse terrace, looking at the city lights stretching to the horizon, Leo found himself thinking about Chloe in a way he had never allowed himself to think before. For 4 years, he had maintained a rigorous professional distance, respecting the boundaries he believed necessary between boss and employee. But that night, with the family pressure weighing on his shoulders and the 2-year deadline echoing in his mind, he began to wonder if he hadn't wasted too much time being too cautious, if he hadn't missed opportunities to get to know the only woman who truly sparked his interest and admiration. Chloe was intelligent, dedicated, trustworthy, and had a natural beauty that attracted him in a way he had never experienced with any of the women in his social circle. She knew his routine, his tastes, his preferences, his quirks better than anyone, and yet she had never shown any sign of impatience or judgment. She was the person he talked to most daily, the person he trusted most for professional matters. And perhaps she was also the person who knew him best as a human being, beyond the facade of a successful executive he maintained to the world. For the first time in 4 years, Leo allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if he had the courage to break down the professional barriers he had built between them. What it would be like if he could talk to her about his feelings, his fears, his doubts about the future. Would she feel anything for him beyond professional loyalty? Would the intense glances they sometimes exchanged mean something deeper? Would she think of him when they weren't working together? What do you think Leo will do with this ultimatum? Will he approach Chloe with a proposal? And if so, how will she react? Share your predictions in the comments below. The unconventional proposal, the following Friday, was one of the longest and most tense days Chloe had lived since she started working with Leo. From the moment she arrived at the office in the morning, she noticed that something was different in the way he was behaving. He was quieter than usual. He canceled 2 important meetings without giving detailed explanations and spent most of the day locked in his office, staring out the window with a pensive expression she had never seen before. During lunch, he didn't even leave his office, just asked her to order something light from a nearby restaurant, and when she brought him the food, he barely touched the plate. Chloe knew Leo well enough to know when he was going through some serious problem, but this time, she felt it was something different from the usual work stresses she was accustomed to managing. There was a tension in the air she couldn't identify, a heavy energy that made her stomach clench every time she needed to enter his office to deliver documents or reports. He was polite as always, but there was a distance in his behavior that left her confused and slightly worried about the possibility of having done something wrong without realizing it. The hours passed with torturous slowness, and when the workday finally ended, Chloe expected Leo to leave, as he always did, leaving her alone to organize the next day's schedule and close any remaining details. But instead, he appeared at his office door when the clock struck exactly 6 o'clock and said, "Chloe, can you stay a little longer? I need to talk to you about something important." The tone of his voice was serious, but not threatening, and she nodded affirmatively, feeling her heart race without knowing exactly why. They were left alone on the executive floor, with only the city lights beginning to turn on outside, creating a more intimate atmosphere than Chloe was used to sharing with him. Leo asked her to sit in one of the armchairs across from his desk, and instead of staying in his formal position behind the desk, he sat in the other armchair, creating a physical proximity that made her heart race even more. There was something in his posture, in the way his blue eyes looked at her with a different intensity, that made her understand that this conversation would not be about work. "Chloe, how long have you been working with me?" Leo asked, though both knew the exact answer to that question. 4 years and 3 months, Mr. Maxwell," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the confusion she was feeling. "And during all this time, have you seen me with any serious girlfriend? Have you seen me talking about plans to start a family?" he continued, and she shook her head, beginning to wonder where this line of questioning was leading. "Last night I had a conversation with my family," Leo said, getting up from the armchair and walking to the window, turning his back to her as he spoke. "They gave me an ultimatum. I have 2 years to get married and have a child, or I lose the company presidency to my cousin." The words came out laden with a bitterness she had never heard in his voice before, and Chloe felt her stomach clench with a mixture of surprise and something she couldn't quite identify. He turned to look directly at her, and for the first time in 4 years, Chloe saw real vulnerability in his blue eyes that had always seemed so confident and determined. "I don't want an arranged marriage. I don't want to marry some woman from my family's social circle just to fulfill an obligation. But at the same time, I can't lose everything I helped build in the last 12 years. He paused, sat back down in the armchair across from her, and leaned forward, further reducing the distance between them. "Chloe, you are the only woman I trust completely," he said, and the words made her heart stop for a few seconds before racing again at a desperate pace. "You know me better than anyone. You know how I think, how I work, how I react in different situations. You are intelligent, responsible, trustworthy, and—" He hesitated for a moment, as if struggling to find the right words. "And you are the most beautiful woman I know." The confession came out as a whisper, laden with an emotion she had never heard in his voice, and Chloe felt her cheeks warm as she tried to process what was happening. "Mr. Maxwell, I don't understand what you're getting at," she managed to say, though a part of her was already beginning to suspect the direction this conversation was taking, and another part couldn't believe it was actually possible. "I'm asking you to help me, Chloe," Leo said, leaning even further forward and taking her hands in his, in a gesture that sent electricity through her entire body. "I'm asking you to have my child." The words hung in the air between them, laden with a meaning that would forever change the relationship they had built over the years. Chloe looked at his large, warm hands, enclosing her small, delicate ones, and felt as if the entire world had stopped spinning at that moment. For 4 years, she had daydreamed about the possibility of him noticing her as a woman. She had imagined what it would be like if he kissed her, what it would be like if they could be more than boss and assistant. But never, not even in her wildest dreams, had she imagined he would ask her to have his child. "How exactly would that work?" she asked, trying to maintain some rationality, despite the whirlwind of emotions she was feeling. "It would be an agreement between just the two of us," Leo explained, not letting go of her hands. "You would become pregnant. You would have the baby, and I would assume all legal and financial responsibilities. In return, you would receive financial compensation that would change your life forever, in addition to having the guarantee that you would always have a special place in the child's life." "And after that?" Chloe asked, feeling her voice tremble slightly. "After that, we would see how things develop," he replied, and there was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't sure either how the situation might evolve. "Chloe, I know it's a lot to ask. I know it's a decision that would change your life completely, but you are the only person I trust enough for something so important." They remained in silence for long minutes, looking at each other with an intensity that had never existed between them before. Chloe could feel the warmth of his hands enclosing hers. She could feel the masculine perfume that always made her dizzy. She could see in his blue eyes a mixture of hope and vulnerability that made her want to protect him from all the pressure he was under. "Can I think about it?" she finally asked, although she knew deep in her heart that her answer was already decided from the moment he had asked the question. "Of course, it's a very important decision," Leo said, gently squeezing her hands before letting go. "Take all the time you need." Then he paused, looking directly into her green eyes. "I want you to know that, regardless of your answer, nothing will change between us professionally. You will always have your job here. You will always have my respect and my admiration." What do you think Chloe's answer will be? Will she say yes, despite the lack of traditional romance? Share your thoughts in the comments. The beginning of a new reality. When Chloe finally arrived home that night, she sat on the small bed in her rented apartment and tried to organize the thoughts that were in a complete whirlwind. The man she had secretly loved for 4 years had just asked her to have his child. Not out of love, not because he wanted to start a family with her, but because he needed a solution to a family problem. But at the same time, he had said she was the only woman he trusted. He had said she was beautiful. He had held her hands in a way that seemed to carry much more meaning than a simple commercial agreement. She spent the entire night awake, alternating between the euphoria of imagining what it would be like to carry Leo's child and the reality that it would not be based on mutual love, at least not from his side. But when the sun rose on Saturday morning, illuminating the small room where she had spent so many nights dreaming of him, Chloe already knew what her answer would be. She would call him on Monday and say yes, because having a piece of him forever, even in that unconventional way, was better than continuing to love him in silence forever. Monday arrived with a fine rain that left London even grayer than usual. But for Chloe, it was as if the sun were shining with an intensity she had never felt before. She arrived at the office at 7:40 a.m., 20 minutes earlier than normal, and spent those extra minutes mentally organizing the words she would say to Leo when he arrived. The weekend had been an eternity of contradictory thoughts, daydreams, and a growing certainty that this was her only opportunity to have something real with the man she had loved for so long. When Leo arrived promptly at 8:15 a.m., he greeted her with the same professional "good morning" as always. But Chloe noticed that his blue eyes watched her with a different attention, as if he were trying to read in her expression what her answer would be to the question he had asked on Friday. They maintained the normal routine for the first 2 hours of the day, with him participating in a video conference with investors from Birmingham, and her organizing the correspondence that had accumulated over the weekend. But both knew that the pending conversation floated in the air like a cloud charged with electricity. At 10:30 a.m., during a break between meetings, Chloe gently knocked on his office door and said, "Mr. Maxwell, may I speak with you for a few minutes?" He nodded affirmatively and gestured for her to sit in the same armchair where they had talked on Friday. But this time he remained behind the desk, as if trying to maintain some safe distance for what was to come. "I've thought a lot about our conversation," Chloe began, feeling her hands tremble slightly and intertwining her fingers to hide her nervousness. "And I accept your proposal." The words came out firmer than she expected, and she saw the immediate relief that passed through his eyes, followed by something that looked like gratitude, and also a deeper emotion that he quickly tried to hide. "Chloe, are you completely sure?" Leo asked, getting up from his chair and walking to the window, as if he needed a moment to process the answer he had so eagerly waited to hear. "It's a decision that will change your life forever, and I don't want you to feel pressured or to regret having accepted later." There was a genuine concern in his voice that made her realize that, despite needing her help, he truly cared about her well-being. "I'm sure," she replied, surprised by the conviction in her own voice. "But I'd like to know exactly how this would work. Would it be done through a clinic with artificial fertilization? The question came with a blush on her cheeks because, despite being a practical and necessary matter, talking about such intimate details with him made her nervous in a way she had never experienced. Leo turned to look directly at her, and there was something in his expression that made her heart race dangerously. "Actually, I was thinking we could do it more naturally," he said, and the way he pronounced the word naturally filled the entire room with a sexual tension that neither of them knew how to handle. Clinics are cold, impersonal, and involve many people who don't need to know about our personal matters. If we're going to do this, I prefer it to be something just between the two of us. The suggestion hung in the air between them, laden with implications that completely changed the nature of the agreement they had discussed. Chloe felt her face warm even more, and she realized that her breathing had become shallower. The idea of being intimate with Leo, even if only to conceive a child, was something she had dreamed about so many times that it now seemed unreal that it could actually happen. "How would that work?" she asked, trying to maintain some composure, despite the whirlwind of emotions she was feeling. "Well, we would have to meet during your fertile periods," Leo explained, and she perceived that he too was slightly uncomfortable with the intimate nature of the conversation, but determined to be direct and honest about all aspects of the agreement. "I could reserve a discreet apartment where we could meet, without anyone knowing about our arrangement." The idea of secret meetings with him made her stomach clench with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation she had never felt before. "And after I get pregnant?" she asked, trying to focus on the practical aspects so as not to get completely lost in the romantic implications of the situation. "Then you would continue working here normally during the pregnancy. I would cover all medical expenses and anything you needed. And when the baby was born, we would see how to organize custody and the child's upbringing." "And the financial compensation?" Chloe asked, feeling slightly uncomfortable discussing money in such an intimate context, but knowing it was important to have all the details clear from the beginning. £500,000, Leo replied without hesitation. 250,000 when we confirm the pregnancy and the rest when the baby is born. In addition, I would buy an apartment in your name, so you have complete financial independence. The amount was more money than Chloe had ever imagined seeing in her life, enough to completely change her financial situation and give her a security she had never had. But at the same time, the part of her that had been in love with Leo for 4 years slightly resented the idea of receiving money for something she would do for free, just for the pleasure of being intimately close to him. "When would we start?" she asked, feeling her cheeks flush again. "When is your next fertile period?" Leo asked, and the intimacy of the question made her realize how this conversation had completely changed the dynamic between them. "In 2 weeks, she replied softly, barely able to believe she was discussing such personal details with the man she had secretly loved for so long. "Then in 2 weeks, Leo said, sitting back behind the desk, as if the physical distance could lessen the tension that was growing between them. "I'll find a discreet apartment and give you the address. It will be a comfortable and private place where we won't have to worry about acquaintances or embarrassing situations." They spent a few more minutes discussing practical details. How would they communicate about the meetings? How would they maintain absolute discretion? How would they handle the situation in the workplace so that no one suspected anything? But beneath all the practicality of the conversation was an electric current of sexual anticipation that neither of them knew how to express or handle. When Chloe finally returned to her desk, she sat in her chair and stayed for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. In 2 weeks, she would be in an apartment with Leo, not as his secretary, but as the woman he had chosen to have his child. The fantasy she had held in her heart for so long was about to become reality, even if it wasn't exactly in the romantic way she had always imagined. During the rest of the day, they maintained the professional facade perfectly, but Chloe noticed that something fundamental had changed in the way he looked at her. There was a new intensity in his blue eyes, a different way of pronouncing her name, a tension in the air every time they were alone in the same room. When he handed her documents, his fingers lingered a few seconds longer touching hers. When she leaned over his desk to show him a report, she felt his eyes observing not only the work, but also the curve of her neck, the way her blouse fitted her body. That night, when Chloe arrived home, she looked at herself in the mirror of her small bathroom and tried to imagine what it would be like to be in Leo's arms, what it would be like to feel his hands touching her skin, what it would be like to give herself completely to the man she loved, even if it was within the limits of an agreement that had specific objectives. She knew it would be impossible for her to completely separate the feelings she had for him from the physical intimacy they would share. But she was willing to accept any form of proximity with him, even if it came with emotional complications. What do you think will happen during their first intimate meeting? Will their hidden feelings finally come to light? Share your predictions in the comments. A love that blossoms. The next 2 weeks passed with torturous slowness, each day laden with a growing anticipation that left both slightly nervous and hyper-aware of each other's presence. Leo found a furnished apartment in a discreet building in Bloomsbury, in a building where there was no risk of encountering acquaintances or people from their social circle. On the appointed day, he discreetly handed her the key, along with the address written on a piece of paper that she put in her bag with trembling hands. The apartment in Bloomsbury was small but elegant, with neutral decor in beige and white tones that created a cozy atmosphere without being overly intimate. Chloe arrived first, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, wearing a simple but pretty navy blue dress she had bought especially for the occasion, not knowing exactly what kind of clothing would be appropriate for such a unique encounter. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked out the window overlooking a tree-lined street, trying to calm the nerves that left her stomach churning with anxiety and anticipation. When Leo arrived 15 minutes later, she noticed that he too was nervous, despite trying to maintain his usual composure. He had changed from his formal suit into a light blue dress shirt and casual dark trousers, and his hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it several times on the way there. They greeted each other in a strangely formal way, as if they were two people meeting for the first time, instead of colleagues who had worked together for 4 years. "Do you want something to drink?" Leo asked, walking towards the open-plan kitchen that was integrated into the living room. "There's wine, whiskey, water, soft drinks." The list of options came out rushed, revealing a nervousness she had never seen in him during business meetings with millions of pounds at stake. "A little red wine, please," Chloe replied, thinking that perhaps alcohol would help lessen the tension she was feeling. They sat on the small sofa in the living room, maintaining a respectful distance, but aware of each other's every movement. Leo poured 2 glasses of a wine that probably cost more than her monthly salary, and they drank in silence for a few minutes, trying to find a natural way to start something that was completely new for both of them. There was no etiquette manual for this kind of situation, and they were improvising every gesture, every word. "Chloe, I want you to know that you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," Leo finally said, looking directly into her green eyes. "We can talk first, get to know each other outside of work, without pressure for anything to happen today, if you're not ready." His consideration made her even more nervous, but also more in love, because it revealed a gentle side she had always suspected existed beneath his professional facade. "I know this is strange for both of us," she replied, feeling her cheeks blush slightly. "For 4 years we've maintained a strictly professional relationship, and now we're here to—" She couldn't finish the sentence, and Leo gently completed it. to create a life together, even if it's in an unconventional way. The way he said "together" filled the word with a meaning that went beyond the practical aspects of their agreement. They began to talk about things they had never discussed during their years of working together. Their family backgrounds, childhood dreams, books they liked to read, movies that moved them, trips they would like to take. Chloe discovered that Leo had studied piano as a child and still played occasionally when he was stressed. He discovered that she wrote romantic stories in her free time and dreamed of publishing a book someday. As the conversation flowed and the wine relaxed the initial tensions, they gradually drew closer, physically. Leo ran his hand through her hair, commenting on how soft it was. Chloe touched his hand when he spoke about the pressure he felt to meet family expectations. The touches became more frequent and prolonged, charged with an electricity that neither of them could ignore. "Chloe, may I kiss you?" Leo asked, when their faces were a few centimeters apart, and the respectful question made her heart race even faster. Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward, and when their lips touched for the first time, it was as if 4 years of accumulated tension exploded in a moment of pure chemistry. The kiss began soft and hesitant, but quickly deepened as both realized that the attraction they had tried to ignore for so long was real and overwhelming. Leo's hands intertwined in her hair, while Chloe's hands clutched his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart to breathe, both were panting and their eyes shining with desire. "Are you sure?" Leo whispered against her lips, and Chloe responded by pulling him into another, even more intense kiss. They got up from the sofa without breaking the kiss, walking awkwardly towards the bedroom, stumbling slightly over the coffee table, but laughing softly at the lack of coordination caused by urgent desire. In the bedroom, they undressed slowly, exploring every inch of each other's skin, with a reverence that transformed what should have been a purely functional encounter into something deeply intimate and emotional. Leo whispered her name like a prayer, while Chloe discovered that all the fantasies she had had about him over the years didn't come close to the reality of having him touching her with a tenderness that made her feel precious and desired. When they finally came together, it was with an intensity that surprised them. It wasn't just the fulfillment of an agreement, but the consummation of an attraction that had grown silently for years. Chloe surrendered completely, and Leo responded with a passion that revealed his feelings for her went far beyond the convenience of the agreement they had made. Afterwards, they lay embraced in bed, her head resting on his chest, listening to their heartbeats slowly return to a normal rhythm. "This was," Leo began, but couldn't find words to describe what had happened between them. "Different from what I expected," Chloe completed, tracing lazy circles on his chest with her finger. "How different?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "I thought it would be more technical, less emotional," she confessed, raising her face to look into his blue eyes. "For me too it was different," Leo admitted, tenderly caressing her face. "Much more intense and meaningful than I imagined it would be." They met 3 more times that week, always using the excuse of maximizing the chances of conception. But both knew that something was happening between them that went far beyond reproductive goals. Each encounter was more passionate than the last, and they began to spend more time talking after intimacy, sharing stories, dreams, fears, and discovering that they had an emotional compatibility they had never explored during their years of professional relationship. In the office, they maintained the professional facade, but there was a new energy between them that was almost palpable. More intense glances, secret smiles, a new intimacy in the way he pronounced her name or how she organized papers on his desk. Chloe found herself fantasizing about their encounters during work hours, and Leo invented excuses to call her into his office just to be a few minutes near her. The confirmation of life and love at 2 weeks after their first encounter, when Chloe was 3 days late. She bought a pregnancy test at the pharmacy near home and took the test on a Saturday morning. When the 2 lines appeared on the screen, confirming what she already suspected, she felt a mixture of joy, fear, and a euphoria that made her cry with emotion. She called Leo immediately, and when he answered with a voice still hoarse with sleep, she simply said, "It's positive." The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a few seconds before he said, "My God, Chloe, we did it." The emotion in his voice was unmistakable, and she realized that for him too, this had become much more than a commercial agreement. "Can I come over? I want to be with you now," he asked, and she nodded, though she knew he couldn't see her through the phone. When Leo arrived at her apartment an hour later, carrying flowers and a smile that lit up his entire face, Chloe realized that something fundamental had changed between them. He hugged her with an intensity that suggested she was no longer just the assistant helping him with a problem, but the woman carrying his child, and who had become someone special in his life in a way neither of them had planned or expected. The medical confirmation of the pregnancy came on a sunny Monday morning, when Chloe and Leo sat side by side in the office of Dr. David Cooper, a renowned obstetrician whom Leo had chosen for his discretion and competence. The blood test showed perfectly healthy hormone levels for a 5-week gestation, and when the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're going to be parents," Chloe felt tears of joy streaming down her face, while Leo squeezed her hand with a strength that revealed all the emotion he was trying to control. "How has the lady been feeling?" Dr. Cooper asked, adjusting his glasses and glancing at the file he had just created for Chloe. "Some mild morning sickness, a little breast tenderness, but nothing too intense yet," she replied, processing the reality that she was truly pregnant with the child of the man she had loved for so long. "It's completely normal for this stage of gestation," the doctor reassured. "We will schedule monthly consultations and follow everything closely to ensure that mother and baby always remain healthy." When they left the consultation, Leo gently took her arm and said, "We need to talk about some practical changes now that the pregnancy is confirmed." They went to a cafe near the hospital, sat at a reserved table in the back of the establishment, and he began to explain the plans he had made over the past few days since she had called with the news of the positive test. "First, I want you to move into a better apartment," Leo said, pulling a paper from the inner pocket of his jacket. "I found a place in Bloomsbury, 2 bedrooms, spacious living room, modern kitchen, in a building with security and all the infrastructure you'll need during pregnancy and afterwards with the baby." The information came out in an organized manner, as if he had rehearsed the conversation. But Chloe noticed an anxiety beneath the apparent calm. "Leo, that's very generous, but I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of me as if I were a responsibility," she said, distractedly stirring the cup of chamomile tea she had ordered. "It's not about responsibility, Chloe," he replied, leaning forward across the table. "It's about wanting you and our child to have all possible comfort and security. And also," he hesitated for a moment, "also, it's about wanting to be close, wanting to follow every moment of this pregnancy." The confession surprised her, because it suggested an emotional involvement that went beyond what they had initially agreed upon. "What do you mean, be close?" she asked, feeling her heart race with the possibilities those words suggested. "The apartment I chose is only 2 blocks from mine. I'd like to be able to visit you regularly, bring you dinner when you don't feel like cooking, be available if you need anything during the night," Leo explained, and there was a vulnerability in his voice she had never heard before. In the following weeks, Chloe moved into the new apartment, which was more luxurious than any place she had ever lived. Modern and comfortable furniture, state-of-the-art appliances, decor in soft tones that created a cozy and relaxing atmosphere. Leo had thought of every detail: extra pillows for the sofa, an air humidifier for the bedroom, a specially ergonomic armchair for when she needed to rest during pregnancy. What impressed her most was discovering that he had chosen one of the rooms to transform into an office for her, complete with a bookshelf, a work desk, and a small plaque on the door where Chloe's Corner was written in a calligraphy she recognized as his own. "I thought you could work from home when you didn't feel well enough to go to the office, and you could also use this space to write your stories," he explained when she discovered the room. His visits began timidly and respectfully. A phone call asking if she needed anything from the supermarket, a quick appearance at lunchtime with food from a healthy restaurant, a stop by at the end of the afternoon to ask how her day had been. But gradually, these visits became longer and more frequent, until it became natural for him to appear at dinner time and stay until after she fell asleep on the sofa watching TV. One night, when Chloe was 8 weeks pregnant and going through a phase of more intense nausea, Leo arrived at the apartment and found her lying on the sofa, pale and clearly uncomfortable. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the sofa and placing his hand on her forehead to check if she had a fever. "The nausea is worse today. I haven't been able to keep anything down since breakfast," she confessed, closing her eyes and letting herself relax with his gentle touch. "Did you take the medication Dr. Cooper prescribed?" Leo asked, and when she nodded affirmatively, he got up and went to the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with a ginger tea he had prepared and a lightly toasted piece of bread. "My mother used to make this when I got sick," he explained, helping her sit up and offering her the cup. "Ginger helps with nausea, and plain toast is easy to digest." His care deeply moved her, because it revealed a protective and caring side she had never seen during their years of working together. He stayed with her late that night, massaging her feet when she complained they were swollen, adjusting the pillows to make her more comfortable, and simply chatting about light topics to distract her from the discomfort. "Leo, can I ask you something?" Chloe said when he was preparing to leave. "Of course, you can ask anything," he replied, stopping at the living room door. "Why are you being so careful with me, so attentive? This goes far beyond what we agreed upon in our pact," she questioned, looking directly into his blue eyes. He remained silent for long seconds, as if struggling internally about how much he could reveal of the feelings that were growing inside him. "Because you are no longer just the woman who is helping me have an heir," he finally said. "You are the person who is carrying my child, who is going through discomfort and body changes because of me, and who has become very important to me in a way I didn't expect." The confession hung between them, loaded with meanings that neither of them knew how to fully process. "Important how?" she asked softly, feeling her heart race with the possibilities implicit in the answer. "Important as the person I think about when I wake up in the morning, as the person I want to see at the end of every day, as the person I care about in a way that goes far beyond professional responsibility," Leo replied, moving closer to the sofa again. "Leo," Chloe began, but he knelt beside the sofa and took her hands in his. "I know our agreement didn't include personal feelings. I know we started this as a practical solution to a specific problem, but I cannot deny that I have developed feelings for you that go far beyond what was planned," he confessed, looking directly into her green eyes. "What kind of feelings?" she asked, though she suspected the answer and felt a hope growing in her chest. "Feelings of protection, of affection, of love." The last word came out as a whisper laden with vulnerability. "I've fallen in love with you, Chloe, not just with the mother of my child, but with you as a woman, as a person, as the partner I never knew I was looking for." Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. "I've fallen in love with you too," she confessed, squeezing his hands in hers. In fact, I was already in love with you a long time ago. Since the first few months working together, accepting your agreement was as much about helping you as it was about having an opportunity to be close to you in a more intimate way. They kissed then, there on the living room sofa, with a passion that was different from the encounters they had had to conceive the baby. It was a kiss that sealed a mutual declaration of love, that transformed a commercial agreement into a real love story, that promised a future built on true feelings instead of practical convenience. That night, Leo stayed to sleep at the apartment for the first time, not in the guest room he had prepared, but in her bed, hugging her as they talked about the future they now envisioned together. They talked about names for the baby, about what it would be like to raise a family, about how they would transform that agreement into a real and lasting relationship. What do you think of Leo's confession of love? Did you see it coming, or was it a surprise? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Public declaration and true partnership. The 12th week of pregnancy brought visible changes in Chloe's body that made Leo even more protective and possessive in a way she had never experienced in her life. Her belly began to round slightly, creating a subtle curve that he couldn't help but affectionately touch whenever they were alone. Her breasts had enlarged and become more sensitive, and he treated every inch of her body with a reverence that made her feel like the most desired and precious woman in the world. It was during a routine consultation with Dr. Cooper that something definitively changed in the way Leo viewed their situation. They were in the waiting room when a young, attractive man approached Chloe with an interested smile. "Excuse me for bothering you, but don't you work at Maxwell Developments? I'm Mark Evans, from Evans & Cummey Construction. We met at a conference last year," the man said, clearly interested in striking up a conversation with her. "Oh yes, I remember you," Chloe replied politely. But Leo immediately tensed beside her, placing his hand possessively on her thigh in a clear display of territoriality. "This is my wife, Chloe," Leo said, brazenly lying, but with a conviction that made her heart race. "We're here for a prenatal appointment." The word wife came out loaded with a possessiveness that made Mark uncomfortable enough to quickly excuse himself. "Wife?" Chloe asked when they were alone again, trying to hide the smile that threatened to appear on her face. "I didn't like the way he was looking at you," Leo replied with a raw sincerity that surprised her. "You're pregnant with my child, Chloe. Any man who looks at you with interest will have to deal with me first." The primitive, masculine declaration should have irritated her, but instead, it excited her in a way she didn't expect. In the following weeks, Leo's possessive behavior intensified in ways that revealed how much he had emotionally attached himself not only to the baby, but to her. When they went out for dinner, he kept his hand on her lower back, or on her small belly, in a public display that she was with him. When other men looked at her longer than he considered appropriate, he would move closer, sometimes even kissing her possessively in front of strangers. "You're getting very jealous," Chloe commented one night, when they were dining at an expensive restaurant in Mayfair, and she had noticed how he tensed when the waiter was especially attentive to her. "I'm not jealous, I'm protective," Leo corrected, cutting his grilled salmon with more forceful movements than necessary. "There's a difference." But the defensive tone in his voice revealed that he too was surprised by the intensity of the possessive feelings he had developed. "And what's the difference?" she asked, amused by his more primitive side that was emerging as the pregnancy progressed. "The difference is that jealousy is about insecurity, and what I feel is about protecting something precious that is mine," Leo explained, looking directly into her green eyes. "You and our child are mine now, Chloe. I know we didn't start this as a traditional relationship, but that's what it has become for me." The declaration of ownership should have bothered her for being politically incorrect, but instead, it awakened a primitive excitement in her that left her speechless. There was something deeply feminine about being desired and protected in that way by a man like Leo. something that stirred instincts she didn't even know she possessed. "I like it when you get possessive," she confessed softly, surprised by her own honesty. "It makes me feel desired in a way I've never felt before." That confession changed something in the dynamic between them. Leo stopped apologizing for his possessive behavior and began to express it more openly and confidently. He began to introduce her as his girlfriend at social events, although technically, they had never formalized the relationship in that way. He bought an expensive and elegant engagement ring that she wore on her right hand as a symbol that she was unavailable to other men. The most significant change occurred when Chloe turned 14 weeks, and they went to a corporate event where several construction companies gathered for an annual conference. It was the first time she publicly appeared by his side as more than just his assistant, and Leo made sure everyone knew exactly what her position was in his life. "I'd like to introduce my girlfriend, Chloe Davies," he said to a group of influential businessmen, his arm firmly wrapped around her waist. "She's pregnant with my first child." The proud way he made the announcement, as if she were a precious trophy he had conquered, made her heart overflow with happiness. For the first time in her life, she felt truly valued and desired by a man. During the evening, she observed how he treated her with a mixture of protection and adoration that left her emotional. When she mentioned her feet hurt from her heels, he immediately found a chair for her to sit in. When she said she was thirsty, he brought her iced water and stayed by her side to make sure she drank enough. When other men approached to greet her, he positioned himself so that it was clear she was accompanied. "Do you like being treated like a queen?" Leo asked, as they danced slowly on the dance floor, his hands carefully placed on her waist, avoiding pressing on her increasingly obvious belly. "I like feeling special to you," she replied, resting her head on his chest and breathing in the masculine scent that always made her dizzy. "Feeling like I'm the most important woman in your life. You are the most important woman in my life," he said, kissing the top of her head as they continued to sway to the soft music. "Not just because you're carrying my child, but because you've become the person I most want to see every day, the person I trust most, the person I've fallen in love with in a way I never thought possible." The declaration was made in a low voice, but charged with a sincerity that made her melt completely in his arms. That night, when they returned to her apartment, they made love with a passion that reflected all the emotional intensity that had grown between them. Leo treated her as if she were made of glass, touching every inch of her skin with an adoration that made her cry with emotion. He whispered words of love and admiration as he kissed her, telling her how beautiful she was pregnant, how he loved seeing her carrying his child, how she had become everything to him. "I never thought it was possible to love someone this way," Chloe confessed later, lying in his arms with her head resting on his bare chest, listening to his heartbeat that had calmed after their passion. "What way?" Leo asked, stroking her hair that was spread over the pillow. "With so much intensity, with so much feeling, as if you were a part of me," she explained, tracing lazy circles on his chest with her finger. "I hadn't felt anything like this either," he admitted, tenderly kissing her forehead. "When I see you pregnant, when I think about our child growing inside you, when I imagine our family together, I feel a completeness I never knew I lacked in my life." They stayed up late talking about the future they were building together, about how they wanted to raise their child, about the values they wanted to instill, about how they would transform that apartment into a real home for the family they were forming. For the first time since she had accepted the original agreement, Chloe felt completely secure about the decisions she had made. It was no longer about money or convenience, but about real love, about a genuine connection, about building something lasting and meaningful with the man she loved. And for the first time, she truly believed that they would have a happy ending together. Do you think Chloe and Leo's relationship will withstand the pressures of society and their unconventional beginning? What kind of parents do you think they'll be? Share your thoughts. A family is born. The 8th month of pregnancy brought a radiant Chloe and a Leo completely transformed by the love he had discovered. Her belly was now impossible to hide, round and firm, and he couldn't go a day without putting his hands on it to feel the movements of the baby, who seemed increasingly active. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when they were in her apartment watching an old movie, that everything definitively changed between them in a way that would forever seal their destiny. Chloe was leaning back on the sofa with her feet resting on a cushion, wearing a loose dress in blue tones that enhanced the special glow her skin had gained during pregnancy. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, with some strands escaping and framing her face, which had gained softer, more feminine curves during gestation. Leo was sitting beside her, delicately massaging her swollen feet, which had become a constant problem in recent weeks. "They're very swollen today," she commented, wincing when he pressed an especially sensitive spot. "Dr. Cooper said it's normal at this stage, but every day it's harder to walk much or stand for long periods." The discomfort in her voice made Leo feel guilty for being responsible for the changes her body was going through, although he knew she had consciously chosen to go through it. "I'm so sorry you're going through all this discomfort because of me," Leo said, continuing the massage, but with even more careful movements. "If I could carry the baby instead, I would, without hesitation." The sincerity in his voice moved her, because she knew he genuinely cared about her well-being, in a way that went far beyond the responsibility he felt for the agreement they had made. "I wouldn't change a thing," Chloe replied, placing her hand over his, which rested on her ankle. "Carrying your child is one of the greatest privileges of my life, Leo. Every discomfort, every change in my body, every difficult moment is worth it, because I am creating a life that is part of the two of us." The way she said "the two of us" filled the phrase with a meaning that made his heart clench with emotion. The baby chose that moment to give an especially strong kick, making her belly move visibly. Leo immediately moved his hands to the spot, smiling when he felt the tiny foot or fist pressing against his palm through her skin. "He's getting stronger every day," he commented, with an admiration in his voice that never diminished, no matter how many times he felt his child's movements. "Or she," Chloe corrected, as she always did when he referred to the baby in the masculine. They had decided not to discover the sex before birth, wanting it to be a surprise, but Leo always referred to the child as he, in an unconscious display that he secretly hoped for a boy. "Last night I dreamed it was a girl with your green eyes," he confessed, tracing soft circles on her belly. "And she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. And what if it really is a girl? Would you be disappointed?" Chloe asked, observing his expression carefully. It was a concern that had occasionally bothered her, mainly because she knew his family had specific expectations about name continuity and masculine traditions. "I would fall completely in love," Leo replied without a second's hesitation. "Boy or girl, this baby is part of you, and that automatically makes it the most precious thing in the world to me." The answer completely reassured her, but it also awakened a courage she had been building for weeks to ask a question that tormented her. "Leo, can I ask you something important?" she said, changing her position on the sofa to face him. "Of course, you can ask anything," he replied, perceiving by the seriousness in her tone that it was something significant. "What's going to happen to us after the baby is born?" The question came out laden with a vulnerability she tried to hide, but which was impossible to completely disguise. "I know we started this as an agreement, that you needed an heir, and I agreed to help. But now," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now, everything has changed so much between us that I no longer know what the original plan is and what the new plan is. Leo completely stopped the massage and looked her in the eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. There was something in his expression that suggested that this question was exactly what he had been waiting for her to ask, as if he too had been looking for an opportunity to clarify the feelings and intentions that had evolved over the months. "The original plan died a long time ago, Chloe," he said, moving closer to her on the sofa. "It probably died the first night we spent together, when I realized that something much deeper was happening between us than just a commercial agreement." He took her hands in his, that gesture that had become so familiar and comforting over the months. "What I feel for you now has nothing to do with inheritances, family businesses, or social obligations." "What do you feel for me?" she asked, though she knew he had already confessed his feelings before. She needed to hear it again. She needed confirmation that she wasn't imagining the intensity of the love that had grown between them. "I love you, Chloe," Leo said, with a simplicity that made the declaration even more powerful. "I've fallen in love with you in a way I didn't know was possible. You're no longer the assistant who agreed to help me. You're the woman of my life, the mother of my child, the person I want to build a future with." Tears began to stream down her face before she realized she was crying. "I love you too," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I've loved you since long before I accepted your agreement. I've loved you since the first few months working together, when I learned to admire not only the competent professional, but the integrity and caring man you are." "Then marry me," Leo said, and the words came out with a naturalness that surprised them both. "Not for the baby, not for the company, not for family pressures. Marry me because you love me, and I love you, because we want to build a true family together, because we can no longer imagine our lives apart." The proposal didn't come with a ring or an elaborate ceremony, but was made right there on the living room sofa, with him holding her hands and looking into her green eyes that shone with tears of happiness. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Chloe asked, as if she needed to be sure she had understood correctly. "I'm asking you to be my real wife, to raise our child together, to face anything life throws at us together," Leo confirmed. "Yes," she replied without a second's hesitation. "Yes, I want to marry you. I want to be your wife. I want to build a true family with you. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you and being loved by you." They kissed then, there on the sofa, with her large belly between them and the baby moving, as if also celebrating their parents' decision. "We're going to get married before the baby is born," Leo said, when they broke apart from the kiss. "I want our child to be born into an officially constituted family, with parents who truly love each other and who chose to be together out of love, not obligation." The idea of marrying while pregnant, of formalizing their love before the child's arrival, filled Chloe with a happiness she had never imagined possible. That night they made plans for the wedding, talked about what it would be like to raise their child together, about where they wanted to live as a family, about how they would transform their professional relationship into a true life partnership. And for the first time since they had signed the original agreement, both were absolutely certain that they were building something that would last forever, based on the true love that had blossomed between them unexpectedly, but inevitably. What do you think of their decision to marry before the baby arrives? Do you believe their love story is a true testament to destiny? Share your thoughts in the comments. A new chapter begins. The wedding was celebrated on a sunny Saturday morning, exactly 3 weeks before the baby's due date. Chloe was radiant at 8.5 months pregnant, wearing a wedding dress specially designed for expectant mothers, in white silk with lace details that enhanced her prominent belly instead of hiding it. The dress had been a gift from Leo, who insisted on hiring the best seamstress in London to create something unique and special for her, something that would make her feel like the most beautiful bride in the world, even in the final days of gestation. The ceremony was intimate, held in the garden of the house Leo had bought for them to live in as a family. An elegant but cozy residence in Hampstead, with 4 bedrooms, a spacious garden, and a nursery he had personally decorated with light wood furniture and details in yellow and green tones, neutral colors, as they had decided to keep the child's gender a surprise until birth. Only 20 people were present: Leo's parents, who had reconciled with their son's choice after getting to know Chloe better and realizing how happy she made him, a few close friends of the couple, and the 2 employees from the old boarding house where Chloe had lived, who had become like older sisters to her over the years. I, Leo Richard Maxwell, accept you, Chloe Marie Davies, as my wife, to love and respect you in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health, in richness and in poverty, all the days of our life together, Leo said, his voice choked with emotion, holding her small hands in his, while looking directly into her green eyes that shone with happiness. The traditional wedding vows took on a special meaning in this context, because they represented not only a legal union, but the transformation of a commercial agreement into the most beautiful love story any of those present had witnessed. I, Chloe Marie Davies, accept you, Leo Richard Maxwell, as my husband, to love and respect you in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health, in richness and in poverty, all the days of our life together, Chloe replied, tears of joy streaming down her face as she felt the baby move animatedly in her belly, as if also celebrating that special moment. And I promise to raise our child with all the love I feel for you, so that they may grow up in a family united by true love. When the judge declared them husband and wife, Leo kissed her with a passion that made everyone present sigh with emotion. It was a kiss that sealed not only a marriage, but the culmination of a journey that had begun with practical need and had transformed into the purest manifestation of love 2 human beings could share. When they separated, both were crying with happiness, and Chloe placed Leo's hand on her belly so he could feel the baby move, as if the child too was celebrating its parents' official union. The reception was simple but elegant, with a lunch in the garden of their new home, soft music played by a string quartet, and a 3-tiered cake decorated with natural flowers that matched Chloe's bouquet. During the newlyweds' waltz, Leo held his wife with extreme care, one hand on her waist and the other protecting the belly where their child was growing. I love you, Mrs. Maxwell, he whispered in her ear as they danced slowly. And I love you, Mr. Maxwell, she replied, resting her head on his chest and letting herself be carried away by the music and the complete happiness that enveloped her. A complete family, 2 weeks and 4 days after the wedding, on a rainy Tuesday dawn, Chloe woke up at 3 a.m. with regular and intense contractions that immediately made her realize the baby had decided to arrive. Leo, wake up, she said, gently shaking her husband. I think it's time. He woke instantly, with the heightened reflexes of someone who had spent the last few weeks sleeping with one ear always alert for signs that labor might begin at any moment. The drive to the hospital was a mixture of nervousness, excitement, and pure love. Leo drove with doubled caution while holding Chloe's hand between contractions, whispering words of encouragement and love. You're doing amazing, my love. Our baby is coming, he told her every time he saw her face contort with pain. Soon, very soon, we'll meet our son or daughter. Labor lasted 8 intense hours, during which Leo never left Chloe's side for a minute. He massaged her back, offered water, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and held her hand tightly every time a stronger contraction hit her. I couldn't have done this alone, she said during a pause between the most intense contractions. You give me strength, Leo. You make me feel like I can do anything. At 11:17 a.m., after 40 minutes of final pushing, the loud, strong cry of a baby resonated through the delivery room. It's a girl, announced Dr. Cooper, holding up the tiny but perfectly formed child. A beautiful and healthy girl. Leo looked at the daughter who had just been born and cried openly, not caring who might see him showing emotion. She's perfect, he whispered, kissing Chloe's sweaty forehead. You did something miraculous, my love. You brought our daughter into the world. When they placed the baby on Chloe's chest, she looked at that wrinkled little face and felt a love so intense she thought her heart would explode. Look at her, Leo. Look at our daughter. She has your blue eyes, Chloe said, delicately touching the child's tiny face. And she has your nose and your mouth, Leo completed, extending his finger to touch the tiny hand that immediately closed around his large one. What are we going to name her? Elara, Chloe said immediately, as if she had always known that would be the name. Elara Maxwell means bright light, and she brought light into our lives. Leo agreed immediately, because the name sounded perfect for the child who had been conceived in a commercial agreement, but born of the purest love between two human beings. 6 months later, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, the family was gathered in the garden of their house. Elara, now a chubby, smiling baby, was in Chloe's lap, who was quietly breastfeeding her while Leo read the newspaper in a chair nearby. The domestic routine had settled naturally, with Leo assuming the role of a present and participatory father, waking up for night feedings, changing diapers, giving baths, and completely melting every time his daughter smiled at him. Do you regret anything? Chloe asked, looking at her husband who had put down the newspaper to make funny faces at Elara. I regret taking so long to realize I loved you, Leo replied, kissing his daughter's forehead first, and then his wife's lips. I regret all the years we lost keeping our distance when we could have been happy together much earlier. I think everything happened at the right time, Chloe said, adjusting Elara on her lap. If you had confessed earlier, maybe I would have thought it was harassment. If I had confessed my feelings, maybe you would have felt uncomfortable. The agreement gave us the excuse we needed to get closer, and love grew naturally from that. That night, after putting Elara in the crib beside the couple's bed, Leo and Chloe lay embraced and talked about their plans for the future. The company was prospering more than ever, with Leo officially assuming the presidency, and Chloe working as a human resources consultant, applying her natural sensitivity to deal with people in the corporate environment. They wanted more children, a house by the beach, family trips, and, most importantly, many years of happiness together. Chloe, you transformed my life in a way I never imagined possible, Leo said, stroking her hair as she snuggled into his chest. You taught me that true love can be born from the most improbable circumstances, and that sometimes what seems like a business agreement can turn into the greatest blessing of our lives. And you taught me that it's worth risking for love, Chloe replied, gently kissing his chest. That sometimes we need to accept impossible proposals to discover possibilities we had never imagined. They fell asleep that night with Elara sleeping peacefully beside them. A complete family, formed by the most improbable, yet truest, love any of them could have dreamed of. And so, what began as a desperate agreement between a millionaire who needed an heir and a secretary who had always loved him in secret, transformed into the most beautiful proof that true love always finds a way, even when it arises from the most unexpected circumstances and develops in ways that defy all social conventions and rational expectations. If you have come this far on this exciting journey of Chloe and Leo, I hope you have been as moved as I am in telling this love story that was born from the most improbable of agreements. This story teaches us that sometimes destiny uses the most winding paths to unite two souls that were made for each other, and that true love always finds a way to flourish, even in the most challenging circumstances. Leave that heartfelt, like if you believe that love can be born where we least expect it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our heartwarming stories, and share this narrative with someone special who needs to believe that happy endings exist in real life. Comment below. Do you think it was destiny that brought Chloe and Leo together? Or would their love have happened anyway? And tell me also where you are joining us from. What city, what corner of England or the world is listening to this love story? May God bless each of you with much love, much happiness, and the courage to accept the impossible proposals that can sometimes lead us to the greatest loves of our lives. Until the next story, and always remember, when love is true, it always finds a way to happen.